Hello and welcome to this latest edition of Path to Power, our first of the month of August. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
I'm surprised he's as perky in saying that because it has to be said, for those of you who are not watching on YouTube, Ivan is in bits. He's got a very healthy tan. He looks like he took a lot of sun during the week. But Ivan, while I was working, doing a job here in Dublin, you were down in Galway and you look like you're suffering.
Well, I got up at 5:30 on Monday morning. I got the train from Enniscorthy early the 6:20 up to Connolly, over to Houston and landed in Galway, Air Square, where I was for the week. I was actually staying in self-catering student accommodation. There was no day I went under 25 units of alcohol. And
oh my God, Alcohol Action Ireland will be on to us again. We're promoting alcohol consumption.
We'll put it like this. It was like John B. Keane once wrote about Galway Race Week, that it's not actually a race meeting, it's a state of mind. And that actually sums it up.
It's not a state of inebriation.
There's that. But like there's a state of... So there's old crusties like me who've been on for 50 years. There's a whole set of 20-somethings who are dressed as if they're going to a wedding in Peaky Blinders with their caps and their three-piece suits.
Did you not dress like that?
No, beautiful, beautiful women of all age groups. This morning when I was leaving at 7:30, Galway, you know, the walk of shame, so many women scurrying in and out of places in their attire from yesterday. It is just...
And presumably men as well.
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, I don't know what the arrangements were, but the point is this, that it was hedonism. But I have to say, I'm going since...
You love it.
Since the mid-70s that I'm not able for it anymore. But on the punting side, I can never recall such a bookie's benefit, just 200 to 1 shots, never happened before, 50 to 1 shots. So I'm on suicide watch now in relation to my punting, which was an absolute nightmare.
That's not like you to admit to losing money.
Well, put it like this, the pain is such that it's pretty raw, but at the same time, I don't let the winning or losing get in the way. And the amazing thing about it is, I got so many political insights. Met Ned O'Keefe, 82 years of age, and he's as sharp as a tack on Cork East. Tom Hayes of Tipperary, Jackie Cahill was there. And there's people came up to me. You don't know me. I'm Albert Dolan. I'm going to be the new Fianna Fáil TD in Galway East. I'm going to get through the convention in Galway West. So Eamon O'Keefe, we discussed last week, is stepping down. So the convention date is set. Alan Cheevers is a councillor who topped the poll, who fancies that headquarters aren't backing him. John Connolly's from Barna. He's a principal of teacher. And you have Senator Ollie Crow. The general feeling when I go through all the constituencies is, say, a 4-seater. There's one safe F seat, there's one safe FG seat, and there's one independent. And that the incumbents will be hard shifted. And I actually detect...
Sorry, what about Sinn Féin seats in Galway?
Yes, Mairead Farrell definitely, I think, is likely to hold there. Catherine Connolly, a little bit of word that she hasn't confirmed that she's standing, but the expectation is that she will. But definitely people are tuning into the election and the conventions have brought it into sharp focus.
And are they expecting it to be this year or next?
I think they're all starting to campaign from mid-September on. They're actually, going to be canvassing. Because at the local elections, they actually start in April. A fella I sat down beside, and there's a lot of people ask me, what do I really think of Matt Cooper? Now, these are Middle Ireland people. They'd be a bit like...
sorry, you are finding people who are listening to the podcast,
I did find a lot of people.
Because normally you tell me, nobody's listening to this podcast.
Can I tell you what absolutely annoyed me? Like, people coming up asking for tips is normal, and the selfies and all that kind of thing. They did... Back in 2017, I recorded Living with Lucy, right? They seemingly played it out at midnight last weekend and everyone bloody watched it. So that was more prominent than the podcast. But definitely for all political anoraks, they are listening to it. They'd like a mention and all of that good stuff. But we are moving into a period where there's heightened interest in politics and the sort of rat race on the ground and who's up and who's down. But as I was just saying, I think I'm detecting growing confidence from the ground up in Fianna Fáil that they can be the largest party.
You say growing interest in politics, and that's amongst people perhaps involved in it. There was a very interesting thing this week came out. The Electoral Commission did a survey of over 3,000 people in the week after the European and local elections. And one of the standout figures for it was that in definitely more than half of cases, people only made their decision in the week of the election as to who they were going to vote for. And that struck me as being really important in the sense that it shows why we shouldn't put too much store by opinion polls at present, because that does not necessarily indicate how people will vote when they get to election week. It also means that don't place too much store in the local and European results, because an awful lot more people will vote in the general election. And it also shows that you keep going to the very end, that you actually, and that there can be a lot of shifts. I'd imagine if you were actually to have done a similar poll for the 2020 general election, I wonder how many people would have shifted to Sinn Féin in the last week.
Yeah, I'm detecting in all people I speak to, which are mostly Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, of the types who'd be at the Galway races, right? Your publicans, your farmers and all that kind of people, that they're all really down on Sinn Féin. Like, you know that kind of... I'll tell you one thing, Ivan, Sinn Féin are finished in this constituency and so on. Now, I don't know whether it's true. I don't know whether it's wishful thinking, but certainly there's a real kind of antipathy to Sinn Féin.
Well, you see, I think Sinn Féin will get itself off the canvas. And even this week, Owen O'Brien has been out pushing the housing issue. And it's really interesting as well that both this survey by the Electoral Commission and also the monthly tracking by the Irish Times, perhaps more valid than these quantitative opinion polls.
Issues related.
The issues are what's it? Housing is number one. Housing was the number one thing for the European local elections as well, were people thinking of. And Owen O'Brien now is pushing hard. They're drip feeding bits of their policy. That they're going to do a big launch in September. They're going to push hard on housing, and they may actually find some benefit in that. Now, the problem is, how hard will it be for them to convince people that the plans they have will work better than what the government is doing at present, whether they're not just being hopelessly optimistic. The latest thing they're talking about is affordable homes when available to people between 250,000 and 300,000 on land that will remain owned by the state, which you could say, if you're a good socialist, yeah, that's a good idea. Why should the state be giving up land to private interests? But there is this thing amongst a lot of Irish people, they don't just want to own their house or their apartment, they want to own the land on which it sits as well. And there could be issues as well in relation to mortgages if the banks take a view in relation to, well, why would we give you a mortgage for a piece of property but not have the land underneath it as a solid asset?
The antipathy, I get all that. And actually, believe it or not, over several pints, whether you're in the Guinness bar or this bar or that bar, or Murty Rabbits or on Pucon or the Skeff or wherever you might be, and you've often spoke about this, that there are half a dozen really high-profile people, Owen O'Brien, Mary Lou, Pierce Doherty, Louise, and those.
O'Reilly, yeah.
But there's 37 TDs. And what people are saying is such and such a TD, who's one of the 30, who's not high profile, hasn't done a tap of work, and that the ground war is where I'm getting the antipathy to them, that people were elected that really weren't career politicians, was almost accidentally elected, and they're saying, well, I tell you one thing, so-and-so is not going to be returned. They haven't done the work. So that's the antipathy I'm picking up.
And in relation to the housing thing as well, I was talking to one senior minister as well who was expressing a little bit degree of frustration about the housing issue, in that, do people have realistic expectations as to when their children are going to get houses? In that questions are asked, well, my son or my daughter won't be able to buy a house because of you. What age is your son or daughter? In this particular case, I was told of 19. To which, well, hold on a second. When did we ever have a situation where 19-year-olds were actually buying houses? And maybe it's, again, a remnant of the Celtic Tiger hangover. Before, in the 20th century, people used to have to go through the hoops to actually get a mortgage.
Yeah.
And they would have to have...
And save for years.
And save for years and the rest of it. And it was quite tight. And then it suddenly all became looser as well. And that's not in any way to say that, yes, I think everyone should have a right to be in a position to try and buy their own home. I was fortunate enough that I saved enough money without having any input from my parents to have a deposit to buy a house at the age of 26. That is something that my kids will not be able to do. And I very much encourage them to, you look after yourselves rather than expecting money to be given to you by parents or whatever. But maybe there is also a little bit of an unrealistic thing among some people as to when it is, at what age people will be buying their own homes, particularly when they're staying in college later, many, and over 65% of Leaving Cert students go into college. And also when they'll be living a lot longer. Maybe there's time enough before you actually root yourself down buying a house.
Well, there's two big changes over my lifetime. One is life expectancy's gone from 60-something to 80-something. The other thing, the age at which people settle down has gone from 20-something to 30-something, and it's increasing every day. But I met a fella in a pub who actually summed up to me the problem, he said, because I had the very same. I built my house, got married in 85, and I built a bungalow on the land. And the cost of paying for that and building that was the exact value of my salary as a TD, which was 33,000. And this guy said,
God, you wouldn't get that.
No, that's the point.
Today,
the point is this. So what brought that to my mind was this fella said, I had a good job in a semi-state company in my 80s. He said, in the 1980s, and my salary was 37,000, and I bought the house for 37,000. The game changer now is the multiple of salaries is maybe 5-6 times.
Exactly, I agree entirely, and I don't want anyone to misinterpret what I was saying as not having sympathy towards younger generations, because I have. I was in a very fortunate position. I'm just doing the sums in my head now, that when I bought my first house in 1993, it was for 2.5 times my salary.
Yeah.
Right? And there is not a hope in hell that anyone individually, let alone as a couple, could buy a house.
So in the company of this were people in their 20s, and they just looked in awe how a house will be 100% of your salary back in the 80s.
Yeah, and you can understand why they're angry about that, and why they feel that older generations have let them down, and older generations have let them down.
There was one big story this week, and you interviewed him on The Last Word, Michael Ring.
Ah, yes. Was he at the Galway races?
No, he wouldn't.
A Mayo man wouldn't set foot in Galway for the races.
Well, put it like this. So there's a lot I can say about Michael. My first dealings with Michael was that Pádraig Flynn had been selected to be EU Commissioner. And I left politics in 2002. This was 1994, before the Rainbow government got in. And Beverly Cooper Flynn was the candidate, and he was the other candidate. And
this was a by-election.
A by-election, really intense.
Yeah.
And what happened was Beverly topped the poll, we'll say by 500 or 600 votes, but on the elimination of Dr. Cowley and a few others, he won by 400 votes. And this, and it was under Bruton's leadership, and was the first kind of shot in the arm, because the polls had been very bad for Fine Gael. He was under pressure, and of course later that year we went into government. But Ring is a great candidate. He's been
the ultimate local politician, isn't he? In the sense that, I mean, I think at one stage somebody estimated he was doing 13 funerals a day. I actually met him. I remember many years ago, I was at a friend of mine whose father down in Foxford died, and I was at the removal. These are back in the years when I was editor of the Sunday Tribune, and I was at the back of the church with Aileen, and then the ringer was going around nodding at everyone. And he saw me, and Jesus, it was like delight. My God, what are you doing here? You're down from Dublin. Why are you here? And he was the ultimate local politician. But the funny thing was, when I interviewed him the other night, all of the achievements that he cited for himself were actually national ones. I expected him to say what he had done for Westport, because there would be a feeling in Mayo that he did more for Westport than Enda Kenny managed to do for Castlebar, that he delivered locally. And that's why he managed to get a lot of the votes, a bigger vote at times than Enda Kenny down in Mayo. So I asked him about
what did he say? Was it the Wild Atlantic Way?
Yes, he loved that. And the thing about sports grants for facilities.
He was a junior minister under Enda, but he became a full cabinet minister, under Leo in 2017.
Yeah, and he actually seemed to regard what he was able to do as a junior minister as importantly as the things that he did as a senior minister. As one listener texted in, God, no wonder he's retiring. He must be exhausted with all the things he's telling you he's after doing, you know. But I do think he did probably get to a stage where he's 45 years in politics, between Westport District Council, between
15
Mayo County
plus
Council.
30 in the door.
And at one stage, I think it was in all three when you were allowed the dual mandate and stuff.
Yeah.
So I suspect he has burnt himself out a little bit. He's the age of 70. He deserves his retirement.
Well, in fairness, when I was over in Tourmakeedy, I said to you that the word was that he could well retire. And I've been saying it since January. Look, he's done 45 years. So my routine is I get up around 7 in the morning in Galway. I take the 4:01 bus, go out to Salthill, and I do about an hour and a half's walk. You know, that lovely promenade, and you come in by the Salthill Hotel. And this fella started and said, "What's wrong with Fine Gael?" He said, "And now I see Ringer's return. Why is he return?" "Hold on a second," I said. And he said, "Oh, I know Ringer well." And I said, "Do you know his daughter Suzanne?" He didn't know, so he didn't know him that well. But the point is this. You're entitled to retire at 70. In fact, to get out on your own terms is a good thing. I think the daughter will probably run. For me, he was a quintessential client politician. At the parliamentary parties, a great rhetorical speaker. And he would actually put on a whole dramatic performance, particularly from a backbencher perspective. Ye up here in Dublin, in the Dublin media and the Dublin force haven't a clue about this. And you remember...
you try that occasionally on this podcast as well. Not perhaps as convincingly as the Ringer.
Well, he also was one of Leo's big backers, because there was a time Kenny was happy to cling on, and he was actually moving against him.
But more seriously, though, was he a guy who genuinely did have his pulse, or finger on the pulse of what goes on in Ireland?
Sure, I was over there in Tourmakeedy. You know, he got 68 grand for the local GA Club recreational grant. He got that road tarred there last week. He absolutely voracious work. But his background was, if you drive up the hill in Westport and head out to the Asgard, to the Woods Hotel there, you'll see his office. He was an auctioneer and he was in the property. So he was always into the planning permissions and into the wheeling and dealing, like he was well suited to politics.
I've already mentioned the Electoral Commission findings, and just to get the actual figures, 56% of respondents said they made up their mind on how to vote in the local elections within a week of polling day, 42% within just a couple of days, and in the European elections, 64% decided within a week, 50% within a few days, which goes back to the point about being all to play for. But there was lots of other things actually came up.
I wanted to ask you
that.
about something, because I've been out of Dublin. One of the things the Cabinet decided on, without publishing the legislation, something the media types like you have all been looking for, which is the Defamation Bill. So what they talked about was the abolition of juries. What is an SLAPP?
SLAP.
What is a SLAP?
Strategic litigation against public participation.
What does it mean?
It basically means that people try to gag the media. If you have money, if you have power, that you actually... It's not about the fact that what might be written or said about you is right or wrong. It's that they don't want anything to be said at all. And they're able to use the potential of bringing a newspaper or a broadcaster to court and tying up the media organisation in hours upon hours of work and in big fees. It's an expression of the use of power. So there are many very wealthy individuals, business people, who've used this over the years. And political parties. I mean, if a political figure has been backed by his or her political party, they can do the same thing as well. It's a sort of an intimidation. It's a legal intimidation.
So they've spoke about alternative dispute resolution and a serious harm test.
This is another thing as well, because, and this sort of is linked to some of the outrageous jury awards that have been in the past. And funny enough, this has sort of been preempted by the recent Enoch Burke case. Remember when he sued the Sunday Independent? And this isn't a brilliant example on behalf of the media, because, I thought it was clearly the article that was written about him in the Sunday Independent was wrong and should not have been published. But basically the judge decided, well, you actually don't have a reputation that was defamed because you've done so many things which have lowered the public's opinion of you that you're not entitled to any damages, and got nothing, and then ended up having to pay the costs. So I think what's involved in this serious harm clause is to look at that. Okay, yes, maybe what was written or said about you was incorrect, but you know what? It's done no damage to you.
Well, but I'm not on the same camp in this, insofar as that I believe the individual is entitled to protection, and my experience of defamation. So basically, there was this former MI5 guy put up on his website in 2004 that when I was Minister for Agriculture, that he had met me in the Dáil restaurant, and that he had colluded with me with the IRA to be part of a milk powder smuggling carousel across the border. And so once this was put up on the particular Saturday out of a clear blue sky, and Jim Higgins was supposed to be the whip at the time, was supposed to be the thing. And so News of the World, Sunday World, the whole lot, they rang me up. And they said, we're going to print this. And I said, there is just no part of this fantasy that can be indulged on. So I'm not even going to give you a denial, because then it's no smoke without fire. Ivan Yates denies. I said, I'm not going to say anything, but if you write it, I'll sue.
It was fake news.
It was malicious fake news. So, and was just so horrendous. So anyway, what happened was one newspaper, which I probably won't mention, did write it anyway. So I said, I told you I'd sue. Went to the best ambulance chasing solicitor in the country. It took me 4 years and a risk of 200,000 to take the case. It got to the floor. Judge De Valera was there, and it was adjourned 3 times. And I did get a... Now, the great thing about when you win is it's all tax-free. So I got a very good...
If the person actually pays up the money...
Well, no, they did. So actually, I made a fortune out of it. But the legal costs were huge, as much as the award. All 6 figures. It was good.
And your point is?
No, my point is, why did it take me... they rang me up and said, and of course we'll print a front page correction. I said, you'll do no such thing. I don't want to regurgitate this story at all. Oh, what was the story about Ivan Yates and milk powder, which was scam? So all you want is the money, because it was 8 years, 2008, it got to the floor of the court. That is ridiculous, because everyone's life has moved on. And so therefore, where it was just a total nonsense story, you do not want to regurgitate, because someone will say, oh, I heard about that, and there was no smoke without fire.
And I say this as a former newspaper editor, and in the 6.5 years that I edited the Sunday Tribune, I had to deal with many, many legal threats over the time. I would never excuse a newspaper printing an incorrect story like that, and, just using because some gobshite puts something up on a website. And then, because it's in open, it's in the public arena, that then everyone else can reprint it or comment upon it. No, that's not actually the case at all. However, there are various other occasions where I've come across situations with powerful individuals, and what you have is correct information. Mm-hmm. And it's in the public interest. And then
I get that.
So there's a happy medium that has to be met. Listen, going back to these things, and just talking about sort of what gobshites might put up on the internet or whatever, that brings me to this finding in the Electoral Commission, which I think is this is a really bad one, right? So I'm going to read it, right? 22% of Irish voters believe politicians want more immigration to bring in obedient voters who will vote for them in future elections, right? They believe that the establishment, inverted commas, is replacing white Irish people with non-white migrants. And 1/5 of those surveyed say they believe experiments involving new drugs or technologies are routinely carried out on the public without their knowledge or consent. Jesus, where are we at?
Well, in relation to the latter one is just bizarre. The former one, there were footage, there was video footage of people being trooped who had been, just a matter of mere months, put in very deepest rural Ireland and being carted off to vote for the government party. So I'd say...
Is this legitimate footage? Because there are so many times now when you actually have stuff which has been manipulated. Yeah. It even comes from other countries. There is so much fake news being put out there. I mean, we even have this thing at the moment, and in the recent days, where we have this idea that this Algerian female boxer who beat the Italian boxer, that
was
she's
a man.
Actually, and that is just a complete lie.
Is it?
It is. You see, this you have to ask me. She actually, she fought Kelly Harrington in the last Olympics.
Right.
She has fought Irish boxers.
And was she always a 100% biological woman, or is she a trans man?
She is not a trans man. She is born a woman. She is a woman. Now, you can say there may be issues in relation to excessive testosterone, as some women actually have, which is naturally occurring, and chromosomes issues and stuff, but she is a woman. I mean, the bizarre thing is that some of the anti-trans activists who are trying to say what a woman is and what a man is are now actually wrongly labelling a woman as a trans man, it is bizarre. But see, you've fallen for it, and I know other people have fallen for it as well.
But like this, I didn't waste too much time between pints in looking at the story, but I sort of scanned it, and I thought it seemed over, because apparently there was one punch knocked out the Italian or something.
But this Italian just wasn't
the Italian
very good.
was the winner. The Italian wasn't very good.
Yeah. Kelly Harrington beat this Algerian woman in 2020. There wasn't a word about it. We were all happy when she beat her in the quarter-final. And other Irish boxers have fought her too and beaten her. She's lost loads of fights, right, this Algerian woman. This was just a lie. You know this saying? A lie is halfway around the world before the truth gets out of bed. And the internet has exacerbated that. And that brings me to the point in this Electoral Commission finding. Just think about it. I mean,
it is crazy.
You've just told me about...
it's ignorance. Yeah.
It is. Obedient voters who will vote for them in future elections. Establishment replacing white Irish people with non-white migrants. You know, one thing that amuses me about this as well, the very people who say that would say that the government couldn't run a bat. And yet they can run a giant conspiracy of this kind to bring in people to replace the existing voters.
No, it is bizarre. But I mean, I never went with the idea that we had the most sophisticated electors in the world. Period.
So you'd replace them with new ones you'd bring in from overseas?
No. I just want to ask you, because I didn't follow another story that was in the way, which was the Office of Director of Corporate Enforcement had a 6-year investigation into independent news and media. And this was a huge issue about data breaches, right? What actually was said? Because, you know, Dennis O'Brien was in the crosshairs for this and SiteServe. What was the outcome of this?
How long do you have?
Well, no, just give me the abbreviated version.
Oh, Jesus. This is an 800-page plus report, right? I've read it, okay?
Did it not exonerate Mr. O'Brien on the basis that there was no breach of company law?
You see, there were different angles and things. There were different things under investigation. And no, they didn't find that he breached any.
You can't bring yourself to exonerate. But go on, yeah.
No, it's not for me to
Okay,
exonerate.
of course not.
That's not my position. I'm just a reporter telling you what is in this actual Inspector's High Court report, which covered a number of issues. And when it came to him getting inside information from Leslie Buckley, it was explained that he would be regarded as a legitimate insider because Buckley was his nominee to the Board of Independent News and Media, and it would be expected a 30% shareholder. He would know things, and that there's no proof that he acted upon them. So that was one angle in relation to it. The most interesting thing was 19 people had their data accessed illegally, and that has been held.
What type of information are we talking about?
Emails.
Okay.
Right? All their emails. And there was an investigation into, so things were looked for on servers in independent news and media. They were removed and brought to Wales, where they were gone into deep.
So this would be maybe a journalist who had a deep throat source?
Yes,
or
that's the danger. Okay. In fact, one of the directors of independent news and media is quoted in the report because there's large chunks or transcripts of interviews, and he was Dermot Desmond's nominee, and he said this was exceptionally serious because journalists the sources for journalists have to be assured that their information is kept confidential and is not distributed to other people. So that was Dermot Desmond's nominee who said that. So basically what started in the report says, as Leslie Buckley, looking for a particular email in relation to a legal contract that I&M had, expanded into a wider search from 4 people to 19. And in the report, the inspectors say, when you ignore the executive summary, which is in some respects does not give you the full picture at all of what's actually in the report. But basically he said that because lots of documents have been destroyed by the people who were hired by Leslie Buckley to conduct an investigation, which Leslie Buckley says that they then extended without his authorization, that a lot of things were destroyed. So effectively the investigation was run into the sand. But they do say that Dennis O'Brien had no knowledge of the expansion of the investigation and had not authorised it. He did pay for it eventually, an offshore fund run by Dennis O'Brien, to spare Leslie Buckley the embarrassment of the costs of this been revealed to independent news and media, because it was supposed to be part of a cost-cutting exercise which ended up in a very expensive trawl of these emails. So Dennis O'Brien did pay for that. So all of these details are in the report.
I like to summarise it in one line.
But
and
you can't always summarise these things in one line.
But my one-line summary of it from the Alcoholic Haze in Galway was that there was no breach of the Companies Act, and specifically Section 748 was not breached.
No, I never said that. I said that.
No, I know you didn't say that.
Yeah,
but I'm saying, is that a fair summary?
Yeah. On that, there was no evidence to actually support that assertion. My belief would be that the most important aspect of the a large chunk of the investigation was about a possible deal for independent news and media to buy News Talk at the time when News Talk was part of Communicorp. And there are hundreds of pages given over to this, which I found highly entertaining to read. Right. In its own way.
Because the CEO didn't want to buy it, and it was felt like maybe Dennis O'Brien was unloading it a bit because he owned News Talk.
But the deal didn't go ahead, so it actually didn't really matter.
Right.
So, I mean, you wonder, why did the inspector spend €5.7 million over 6 years on this investigation?
All the anoraks like you would love that, but the big issue, you interviewed Jack Chambers.
Sorry, hold on, no, seriously, just let me finish on this point. The big piece was the interception of the data. The Data Protection Commissioner has already ruled that was illegal. And remember that there also was action taken by INM against Leslie Buckley in relation to that. And he left his position. So
in the court of Matt Cooper, no one's exonerated?
No. I've heard say this. I said, I can imagine, and I've written this, and I've written a lengthy piece for the Business Post for Sunday, is that given that clearly Leslie Buckley and Dennis O'Brien feared that this might be injurious to their reputation, that they can certainly breathe a sigh of relief now after the publication of this report.
Okay, the big and the emerging political story, which is a prelude to the election, of course, is the budget on the 1st of October. You interviewed Jack Chambers. What I'm hearing on the ground was that our worst fears are going to be realised in terms of a bonanza giveaway. And what they're going to do is this. They're going to put the cost of living measures, which they're going to roll over on electricity bills and so on. They're going to give people, instead of three €150 payments, credits, one bonanza bazooka in December. So it goes into this year's financial year of €450. And
in fairness, John Lee had this story in the Irish Daily Mail on Monday morning. Yes.
Right. And so therefore, what they've done is, because they can't put it into the 2025 budget, they're going to spend it this year. And with the very healthy exchequer returns, again with corporation tax, I also hear that they're looking at, because they did a reduction in the COVID crisis of
the VAT,
on gas and electricity, and it's going to keep it for another year at 9%.
It was brought down from 13.5% to 9%. They want to keep it there, and I think they're going to have to, because the levy, the standing charge levy, actually goes up now, and that'll add about €100 a year.
Did you put it to Jack that as per Daniel Murray's story, that they were cooking the books?
Yes.
And what did he say?
He has a very skilled politician who talked his way around it and started talking about 5-year windows and
fiscal rules
and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. So you know.
So what conclusion did you draw?
My conclusion is that they're doing it. But John Lee had an interesting line on this, and just again to give him credit for it, when I was talking to him about this earlier in the week, and that is that he thinks that the election will be in March. Right?
Because they want to have money in people's pockets as opposed to the expectation
he said,
of it.
What's the point of giving this electricity credit and giving your double social welfare benefit to pensioners and those on social welfare, and going to the polls in November telling them you're going to get this before the end of the year?
Well, no, you're going to get it next week. You know, that kind of thing, if it's a I do think eating bread is soon forgotten. I would argue that the other way, that once the money's given, what's your next trick you're going to give me? So expectation is better than reality.
But is it the announcement of the money, or does it actually have to land in your bank account?
Well, put it like this. I think if someone says, I'm going to give you €450 on the 1st of December, and if polling day is mid-November, you'd be pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
Also, did he agree that the capital gains tax threshold is going to be raised?
We didn't actually get into that. And you know what? I didn't put. He was in actually talking about the bill that he's inherited from Michael McGrath about cash services and ATMs and availability of cash.
Is that not a snorefest?
Oh, yeah.
There's no political capital in that.
We moved on to other issues in relation to that. But
the other pinch point I hear that is emerging is, so say you had zoned land and you were a farmer.
Yeah.
And say, actually, you never wanted this to be zoned. In other words, that I'm going to continue farming it.
And it's serviced as well. It's easily accessible by water and sewage.
So a 3% tax comes in next year.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at, they might defer that a year too.
Or exemptions for farmers who can prove that they're actually using the land for agricultural output.
Yeah, I'm still of the view it's an act of self-harm to hold a spring election for the government.
We need to take a break. We've forgotten to take a break, and you want to get to the listener questions. So we will get to that when we come back after this break. Welcome back to Path to Power. And what we're going to do in this section is look at some of the many emails that you have been sending into mail@pathtopowerpodcast.com. So that's mail@pathtopowerpodcast.com. Which have jumped out at you, Ivan? What do you want to take?
Well, a particular one caught my eye in relation to Offaly. So, John Dooley, could Ivan take a look at the Offaly constituency ahead of the next election, given that Barry Cowan is leaving for Europe? There's no Fine Gael, Offaly TD or Green TD. How will the new three-seater? So, on the last occasion, there was 5 for Laois Offaly, Charlie Flanagan, Sean Fleming, Carol Nolan, Brian Stanley and Barry Cowan. So when you divide those that are in Laois, which is Charlie Flanagan, Sean Fleming, you're left with and Brian Stanley, Portlaoise and those areas. So first thing, Carol Nolan, write it down, will be re-elected as an independent. She's solidified and strengthened her position. I'm looking at one Fianna Fáil candidate. They have the name I heard. So you have Burr, you've Tullamore and you've Eden Derry. And geography is very important. They're going to run 2. Councillor Claire Murray from Eden Derry is going to the convention, and Tony McCormick from Tullamore. The smart money is on Tony McCormick. I think he probably will be a TD. The strong Cowan Fianna Fáil vote there. The last seat, therefore, is a toss-up between Fine Gael and Sinn Féin. So Marcella Corcoran-Kennedy lost her seat there. So apparently someone that worked for her. So there's 2 candidates going forward for the convention. Clendenin, who's in one side of the constituency, and Feary from Tullamore. So put it like this, you see, will the Shinners get an Offaly TD? I think it's looking like 1 independent, 1 Fine Gael, 1 Fianna Fáil. Okay.
Next question is, have you any more gigs coming up for Dublin, and if so, what dates? I'll be in Dublin from September this year. This comes from Stephen in Sligo, who says, I don't suppose you have any plan for Sligo. Well, we don't at the moment, but if there's a big enough venue in Sligo that wants to take us, maybe we will. This gives me an opportunity to mention again, we are going live, Path to Power the podcast live, which will be in the Olympia in Dublin on the 11th of September, which is a Wednesday night. And hopefully Donald Trump will live up to the promise of having a debate the previous night with Kamala Harris. And we'll have that to talk about. But even if they don't go ahead with that debate, we'll have loads of local issues to talk about and guests as well. So that's our Dublin event on Wednesday, September the 11th in the Olympia. Tickets available at ticketmaster.ie. And then 2 days later, we're going to Cork. On the Friday evening, we're going to be part of the Cork Podcast Festival, and we will be in the Cork Opera House. So you can get the tickets for that at corkoperahouse.ie.
And what people don't know is that Matt Cooper's a very hard taskmaster, and he's asked me for each occasion in Cork to look at the 5 Cork constituencies. The thing when I started my preliminary look at this, I think it's going to be easier to be elected to the next Dáil than the last Dáil, simply because there's 14 more seats. In Cork, there's 2 more seats. There is a complete radical redraw of, you would know this better than me in terms of the Cork constituencies. Like Cork North Central is just no replica of what it was. 22,000 people would that be Blackpool, the north inner city here?
Yeah. Where I would have gone to school in the North Mile. Not Mahini and Grobbar.
Okay. Well, I know it. I know little and I care less. But the point about it...
You will care when I get you down to Cork,
But the point about it is that's gone into the South constituency. Both of them being made 5-seaters. But they've taken a huge...
Can I say, that is just ignorance on the part of the Boundary Commission. And that is an insult to the people of the north side of Cork City to move those areas into Cork South Central.
So what they've also done, to make up the numbers, because it's a 5-seater North Central, which was 4. They're taking a huge scalp from Cork Northwest. So Cork Northwest goes out to, is it Mill Street? It goes to all those areas like Blarney. So that's moving into the city, and then they're taking another scalp from Cork East and Mallow and moving. So that the Cork North Central is just unrecognisable from the previous one. And for Dublin...
Sorry, I think that's why Sean Sherlock decided to retire rather than moving into that constituency. Don't give away too much of what we're going to be
and in the generality of the Olympia, 4 extra TDs to be elected, 2 on the north side, 2 on the south side, and 12 constituencies. The only new constituency is Fingal has been split into 2. So, but if you're from Dublin Midwest, Dublin Rathdown and Dublin West, it is going to be easier to be elected because there's an extra seat. So I'll be giving, I'll have to talk to my deep throats all around the place, but we'll have that and plenty of crack.
Okay, there's one from a few weeks ago, and I can't remember. In reference to the point you made about our beef market, we export a huge amount of beef per annum. We should be looking after our own garden and not concerning ourselves with Argentinian beef imports. Reducing our pricing would help our farmers selling our excellent beef in Ireland. I'm not quite sure I remember what that was about.
Well, put it like this. The Mercosur agreement didn't go through, which deals with Brazilian and all of those countries. But can I tell you this? Last week, the Teagasc figures for farm incomes were devastating. So in simple terms, 2022, best year ever. Dairy farmers, 140 grand a year. Their income, average income for a dairy, has gone down to 49,000. And total farm incomes across tillage and beef and so on, referred to there, is down nearly 60%. But combination of weather and costs.
Will you explain what income means to me there? Is that the profit on running a business after they've paid wages, or is that the money from which they pay their wages?
So what they do is, so say there's a father and son working on a farm in a partnership, whatever, they get the number of labour units and they divide the net income, which is taking account of all the costs and so on. And do you know what that figure is? It's pretty measly. Could you survive on it? 19,925 euros is average farm income in 2023. My point is this.
That's the money that people have to live off.
Yeah. So, you heard all the anti-green stuff and all the red tape. There is a sting in the tail for farmers, having had a really good year in 22. They're actually, and I'm always giving out to them that they never stop moaning and whinging and crying, but actually they have something to cry about.
And how will that impact on their voting?
I actually think that's a very good question. To presume that there'll be a rosy welcome for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael is not here. An interesting question. Rory Cunningham. I'm enjoying the podcast, listening to you both opinions, blah, blah, blah. Apparently he bought the book Who Really Owns Ireland. He hasn't read it yet. But anyway, he said, before Ivan paints me with the woke brush, I can assure you a stance or ideology does not hold an ounce of resonation with me. But he goes on to ask 2 questions. The first is, as a 24-year-old from the west of Ireland, interesting how you would both strategise an election campaign from my perspective and local journalism. My strong advice to you is, A, join a party. B, go local. All politics is local. You've got to get a base area and it's incremental after that. You just crawl your way up, whether it's a town council, a county council, to the Dáil, to wherever. Do not think you can be parachuted in at the top.
Well, and also as well, the necessity to go door to door rather than relying on social media or whatever. And my apologies, this just come into my mind. I can't remember his name, but there was an immigrant who won a local council seat in Cork. He's a bus driver. I can't remember his name. But he reckons that over the last 4 years, he has knocked at every single door in the constituency that he won the seat.
Sometimes 3 times.
Yeah, he literally just went door to door and he got to make sure if he wasn't getting an answer, he'd go back, introduce himself, make sure. I think he's a postman, actually.
For 40 years, Richard Bruton would dedicate every Friday to going around to Clontarf and his constituency and say, can I be of assistance to you? That door-to-door thing is unbelievable. Here's a question for you from John Connolly. RFK, Robert Kennedy, right? So he's going to appear in the ballot paper for the 5th of November in Michigan, in New Mexico, which Trump lost in 2020, but he may be on the ballot paper in Pennsylvania and Georgia. What impact do you think he will have? Because surely he'll take Democrat votes. And by the way, Trump has now gone to 8 to 11. We spoke about he was sort of 2 to 7, 1 to 2. It's a good job I didn't lay that bet with you. You're offering me a lousy 1 to 3 odds. I can now back him at better than 4 to 6. But this RFK, do you think it's impactful or not?
Is anyone even talking about him anymore? This is the thing. He's just disappeared from, as far as the American public seems to think, it's a 2-horse race. It is Trump versus Harris. And things are moving. I mean, I'm not going to make any predictions as to how things work out, but this has not been a good week for Donald Trump. Actually, people say that, okay, sure, 2016, he was able to survive the Hollywood All Access tape, which saw him boasting about sexual assault against women, and that didn't stop him winning the election. And the belief is that he's almost immune from any of these, what would be for other politicians, gaffes. But what he said the other night about jobs, the black jobs, which was so dismissive, the way that he tried to talk about Kamala Harris, is she Indian? Is she black? She can't make up her mind. Backfired big time on him. The response he gave to the journalist who asked him the questions at the Association of Black Journalists, it was not a good week. And just because he got away with it in 2016 doesn't mean he's automatically guaranteed to get away with this sort of bad behaviour in 2024. The dial has shifted dramatically in recent weeks. Nobody's talking about RFK. But yes, RFK might take votes from Harris in some places. Equally, he could take votes from Trump, because the type of things he talks about appeals to those who might be Trump voters, but who just can't bring themselves to vote for Trump. So you're thinking
marginal relevance?
Well, I think so, yeah.
Okay. 2 quick ones. Rita admonishes me. I was astonished to hear Ivan Yates from Glorious Dromageddon today say that we hadn't heard of the podcast here. For clarity, I watch your podcast every week a mile away from Courtmore on broadband, which is state-of-the-art and beats what I have at home in southeast England. And big congrats on the podcast. Well, I stand corrected on that, but the broadband is very iffy around Mayo. And then someone said, this is Kevin Daly. I was wondering if it might be possible to have a brief discussion on how Sinn Féin might stop their free fall in the polls, and secondly, what's to be done about the rising far-right movement. I would say the only game changer that Sinn Féin really need to make is to say that the notion of being rigid, with plenty of hubris about that they would only lead a government and they wouldn't go into coalition, they should say, we will talk to every party after the next election and want to get our policies implemented.
Well, one last one. Neil in Dublin. I wonder if the protesters at Coolock would change tack if they were told that the modular homes inside of Crown Paints were now going to be allocated to Irish people. Do you think, would that be the end of the protesting? And Neil says, I don't.
Well, my point about that was, if you want to put apartments in there or modular housing, you will not have the planning exemption. You have to go through 5 years of planning hell to get it. But put it like this, I think the resistance to Ukrainians was far less to the international provision. So there is an element of racism in the objections.
Okay. Before we finish, we will be talking next week in a bit more detail about infrastructure, but you want to tee it up by making a point from something you heard down in Galway.
Yeah, one of the top engineering consultants said to me, Ivan, change the department if you want, and we'll discuss that next week, a new infrastructure delivery department. He said the most important thing is in Britain, they introduced something called the NEC, the New Engineering Contract, which said of a fixed price for building the National Children's Hospital, you have this joint venture between the state and its procurement, and that this has really meant that more people tender, more projects get through the pipeline, and they said if that isn't done, then you're... But they also said to me, the idea that the Department of Education will give up control of their capital budget for school building was just fantasy.
Okay, we will leave it there, and we will be back with 2 special programmes in early August, which we'll be straight up front about. We'll have recorded, and we're going to pray that no big news stories break over the next 2 weeks. But you will have a new edition available to you on Friday the 9th and another one available on Friday the 16th. And don't forget to get on to Ticketmaster to book your tickets. And don't forget to go to the Cork Opera House website if it's Cork you want to go to instead. And I recommend to a friend, please, that you can hear the podcasts on Apple or Spotify or any of the other platforms where you get podcasts. Or if you want to look at us and if you want to look at Ivan, who's hanging after his week in Galway.
Will we have any guests? Will we have any guests?
We will.
All right.
I'll organise the guests for Cork. You organise the guests for Dublin.
Right. Okay.
We'll see how that one works out. Anyway, until the next time, from me, Matt Cooper, thank you for joining us on Path to Power.